Hello, in this video I'm going to be attempting to install the 3 gates that I made in a previous video. I say attempting because this one could get interesting. This is a job for my auntie and I first viewed it back in March, and basically the gates that she had fitted were braced incorrectly, they sagged and they didn't work properly, so she wanted some gates to replace them. But when I looked at the job I found that some of the posts were rotting from the ground up and they were fitted in an unconventional way. So I basically said that the best option would be to get some new posts installed, and at that point I could come back, measure up again, and then make the gates to fit. For several months after that, both of us were trying to sort out various tradesmen to come in and fit new posts, all of which unfortunately let us down. And eventually it got to a point where my auntie basically said, I just want new gates installed. And I said, well, I can make them to fit the existing posts. It's just that in a few years' time, they're probably going to need to be replaced anyway. But she said, that's fine, just go ahead and build them. So I started making the gates. And when I was about halfway through that project, I was told that she'd found a tradesman to fit new posts. So I sent the tradesman the dimensions of the gates that I had already made, and today I will find out whether they're going to fit or not. But there's a further complication too, which is that yesterday I got told that there are only 2 gate posts installed, and obviously for 3 gates you need 3 gate posts. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to find today, but we will find out more shortly. So as you can see, the new posts are concreted into the ground as they should be, and when I arrived I first checked to see if the posts were plumb, and they were. And then I used my laser measure to check the dimensions at the top and bottom. I was very happy to see that they were within a few millimeters of the dimensions that I'd given to the tradesman, who had done a great job. I rigged together this little dolly thing just to help me move the gates around on my own. And a couple of notched bits of timber on the floor allow me to get it positioned. And here's the point when I realised that the wind might be an issue on this job. That was very nearly a disaster. I'm fitting some 600mm galvanised cranked hook and band hinges. It's a good rule of thumb to have your hinges span about 1/3 of the width of the gate, and these should do the job nicely. I drill a 5mm pilot hole and then use some M8 40mm coach screws to secure the band part of the hinge to the centre of each of the rails. And then while fighting the wind, I get it positioned and fit the hook part of the hinge to the posts. And I'm aiming to leave a gap of about 6 to 8mm between each gate and between the gate and posts. These are 100mm M6 coach screws. I would have liked to use M8 for this as they're thicker, but I had to get what was available to me at the time. And then I drill a 10mm hole for an M10 coach bolt, which I get secured with a washer and nut on the front. I can then lift the gate to free up my notched timber, ready for fitting the second gate. A quick check for level, and it's looking good. Next I want to get the gates straight with one another and with the face of the posts. Now I'm just sighting these through, and looks to be pretty straight there. At the moment where the gates meet, there's a bit of a bigger gap at the top than the bottom, so I'm just going to try and close that up a little. I loosened the bottom 2 hinges on both gates, drove in a wedge, and then tightened them again, which gave me just enough movement to widen the gap. I got this drop bolt to give one of the gates an anchor point into the ground, and this needed a 20mm hole, but I didn't have a 20mm bit for my SDS drill. So I just had to kind of do the best I could with the bits that I had to open up the hole, but ultimately I wasn't happy with the results, so I'll come back to this later. I fitted a bolt at the top and at the bottom because it's pretty windy here, so that should help keep the gates together. There is still a slightly bigger gap at the top than the bottom, but I don't mind that actually, because I think over time the weight of these gates is going to cause the posts to lean in slightly, so I think that gap might close up over time. With the first 2 fitting nicely, it was on to gate number 3, the smaller pedestrian gate, and this is the one that didn't have a post to be mounted to. You can see on the wall where a post was previously though, and when I offered up the gate to where the post used to be, the gap between it and the wall measured about 120mm, so the best option to me seemed to be to get a 4x4 or 100mm square post to mount the gate to. So I went to a local DIY shop to pick one up, and while I was there I also picked up a 20mm SDS bit so that I can finish off that hole in the ground for the drop bolt. As I tuck into last night's leftover pizza, I want to tell you about Tradeify, who are kindly sponsoring this video. Tradeify is an all-in-one job management application for mobile and desktop, and it's designed especially for busy tradespeople. You can use the app to take away all of the hassle from boring admin tasks like managing incoming inquiries, raising quotes and issuing and tracking invoices, timesheets, appointments, reporting, and loads more. For a free 14-day trial, you can use the link in the description box below. And if you'd also like to get 50% off Tradeify for 3 months, once the trial expires, you can use the promo code RAGandBone when you sign up. Thanks, Tradeify. This tube to receive the bolt came in the pack with it, and there was also a little cover plate to fit over the top of this, but I actually preferred how it looked without the cover plate. So now to fit the post, first I measured the height of the other post from the ground, and I marked up that measurement onto the wall, and that's where I want the top of the new post to finish. Then I measured the distance from the bottom of the render to that pencil mark, because I don't want the post to be in contact with the ground where it will soak up moisture. I used that measurement to mark up the post, and I tilted the base plate of my circular saw to 45 degrees, which will give the top of the post some runoff for rainwater, and I can make those cuts. But I didn't really like the way that looked. The angle looked a bit too steep, so I cut it again at 30 degrees, and that looked better to me. I didn't have a sharp chisel with me unfortunately, so I had to do the best I could with a blunt one that I found in the van to clean up that cut. And I'll treat that with a few coats of clear preserver. A link to what I'm using will be in the description box below. Then I can prop up the post onto some bits of timber to the right height and get it screwed to the wall using some 150mm concrete screws. With the first one in, I can make sure that the post is sitting plumb, and then I can add the rest. $10 in total, just to be on the safe side. So as you can see, this gate fits at a 45-degree angle to the larger two gates, and that made for some complications when it comes to fitting the hardware, which I'll talk about later in the video. So I've made a bit of a boo-boo here. The plan was to have the small gate flush with the larger gates. However, because I chopped the post down to length to finish flush with the bottom of the render, as you can see my hinges now don't line up with the post. So I've got a couple of options here. I can either lift the hinges, although I'd need to fill this area with some timber somehow, or I can just mount it a couple of inches higher and it will sit higher than the larger gates. Bit of a shame. I'm going to have a word with my aunt now and see what she wants me to do. Mounting the hinge higher was the best option in my opinion, and my auntie agreed, and we managed to find another old decking board that I could cut to fit the opening. It was covered in algae though, so I found a scrap of sandpaper on the van to clean it up a bit. I'm going to glue this to the back of the gate and secure it with a few screws through from the front. And then I can get some stain painted on to blend it in. And once I got this gate hung on some smaller 450mm cranked hook and band hinges, I had the conundrum of trying to figure out how to fit the handle latch plate and the plates to receive the bolts. So I went back to the workshop and I pulled out an old salvaged 3x3 fence post and I ripped some clean ends on it, and basically I want to rip the corner off this to give me a right angle triangular workpiece of the dimensions needed to close the gap between the gate and the post. I get this sander just to clean it up, And then I cut what will be the top at a 30-degree angle, again for rain runoff. And I give it a few coats of clear preserver. I arranged to go back to my auntie's on another day to fit this piece. I just needed to offer it up to figure out where I wanted it to be, and I get it secured in place with a few screws. And then finally I can get those last pieces of hardware fitted. After adding the handle, I removed it again so that I can eyeball the centre between all of the screws and drill out the hole for the handle spindle. After a few final stain touch-ups, the job was complete. And you can see here we added a third bolt to the large gates on the centre rail, again just to help with the wind issue, and also it made everything look nice and symmetrical. So that's the installation complete, and now I'm back home and I'm pretty pleased with how it went in general, aside from being out in the sun all day with no sun lotion. So I did get pretty sunburnt. It was one of those jobs where I'd planned every eventuality in terms of the tools that I might need to complete the job, but I forgot about looking after myself, so I didn't bring a drink with me, which was stupid, and the lack of sun lotion was even more stupid. Anyway, full job costings for this one can be found on my Patreon and YouTube channel membership pages. If you're interested to see those, please subscribe to the channel for more videos. If you'd like to help support the channel, plus get early access to the videos, exclusive content, free project plans and cut lists, and a name credit at the end of my videos, you'll find links to my Patreon and YouTube channel membership in the description box below. Thank you for watching.